Welcome to Source Medicine. My name is Nikolay Ayerov, quantum security specialist and founder of Avo Peace.
And I'm Anita, medical herbalist, biomedical scientist, intuitive healer, and frequency medicine practitioner. Together, we explore what it means to remember that healing doesn't start with fixing something broken, but with listening to what is already whole.
Each week, we'll travel between the seen and the unseen, from ancient herbal wisdom, nutrition, and nervous system science, to energy work, polarity, and the quiet intelligence that moves through all of us.
Our conversations aren't prescriptions, they are invitations. We are not here to tell you what's true, but to help you feel truth in your own body.
So wherever you are, walking, driving, taking a rest, let it remind you that you are part of the medicine.
This is Source Medicine. Welcome everybody to our second episode of the Source Medicine podcast. Today we are diving into the extraordinary world of Nikolay Ayerov, my dear friend and co-host of this podcast, quantum security specialist. Nikolay bridges the practical and the mystical, speaking about leadership and energy. From my side, I will not reveal more because today the stage is yours, Nicholas. So for listeners who are meeting you for the first time, could you describe yourself in a few words?
Well, thank you so much for having me on our own podcast. So a little bit, I guess, how do I describe myself in a few words? I am a visionary, a leader, I guess a kind soul, to be as humble as possible. And I think that those would describe me pretty well.
Okay, so let's dive deeper. So we go step by step explaining all of this. So what was life like for you growing up? So what shaped actually your early worldview and sense of self? Of course, you grew up in New York. It's this huge city with a specific energy, and how this energy even felt for you as a child?
So yeah, New York is definitely because I grew up in Manhattan, which is basically the center of New York. We came from actually the Soviet Union collapsing at one point, so I had a little bit of time in the basically, I guess you can call it communism, and then we went into capitalism automatically. So both sides of the polarity were felt by myself as I feel like I was very sensitive, from day one of coming to this planet, essentially. And I felt and I picked up just about everything that I felt around me. And when I was in New York, it was very much like the best thing I can describe is calling it beautiful chaos. It was chaotic. It was uh, very strange. Like you almost had to desensitize yourself to a lot of stimulus that would happen was you're experiencing homelessness, you're experiencing, people that have some form of mental uh, this disability to where things are just, eh,
And
you're in sub.
difficulties, mental difficulties.
Yeah, the
Call
mental
them.
difficulties. I don't like calling it mental disease because I don't really believe there is a mental disease outside of very, very rare specific cases. Um, but it's not a commonly used term where it's just mentally unstable, maybe is the best word to call it, where people are fractured and they're walking around and you receive that as a child. I don't know how aware I was of that, where I can consciously bring myself to that awareness, but looking back, I definitely probably was feeling a lot. And even up to the age of 4 in like my family dynamic, I think looking back at it now, it feels like I understood how dynamics worked. I understood how systems worked, and I tried to help people understand them at a very early age. Even when it came to like my parents, where if they were fighting, I would basically almost start like coaching them of how to relate with each other. And I don't know how well that was received at that time. Probably not so well as a 4-year-old Nikolai was like coaching parents on how to live life and how to operate with each other. And then I think at a certain point, probably wasn't received quite as I would like it to, not just by my parents, but probably by the world. So in kindergarten, I remember I started kind of being a troublemaker, and that's also how I kind of felt about the educational institution. And as we'll get a little deeper into that,
Mhm.
where I didn't like school at all, so I automatically started being the class clown. I started disrupting things. I started trying to basically acting for attention, asking like, hey, maybe someone will see me if I act out, right? Maybe someone will understand who I am on some deeper level. Because I wanted to share things. I wanted to help people around me, but I don't think that was received at the time. So I think at a certain point earlier in those ages, I kind of just turned all of that off and just kind of played dumb for most of my childhood. And just like, was, oh, you know, if I don't perform, I'm not going to be expected of, right? So if I'm not expected of, that means I have less eyes on me. And then that's for me, that's I can coast through my early years. And I think that was the best form that I took, the best and easiest mode of transportation that allowed me to more or less survive childhood, even though I had a more or less a beautiful childhood. Family was lovely. Everyone was, I was always loved. I was always taken care of. But I definitely
But you
going
felt
in.
like you
Yeah,
were not matching, let's say, the system you were living in.
yeah, absolutely. The system and me never got along. Like the public school system was, it just immediately, like I think when kids act out, it's because they don't agree with what's happening.
Mhm.
And when you want, typically when you're causing a disruptance, you're trying to disrupt the system, right? As best as you can from a young age. Obviously, when you're younger, you don't have as much say in how things operate. So you kind of have to be forced along into these things. But basically, the power that you do have is to kind of cause disruption, be funny, uh, create levity in situations where you just don't want to be in. Um, so that was definitely, I mean, I think my parents got called on into the office, principal's office, more times than I can count. And yeah, it was, God bless their souls, but they knew what they signed up for, I think. So
But that makes me think also about growing number of so-called diagnoses for
yeah,
kids
oh,
with ADHD or so I
ADHD, yeah,
yes, so I you can think of some neurological disbalance, biochemical imbalance in the nervous system from the physiological point of view. But I believe strongly that it's much deeper. It's like that the soul knows that something is wrong with the systems. It's just
yeah,
that the nervous system cannot follow as quickly as it should. And that creates the chaos for them and of course for parents or at work or at school. But it's not necessarily something what we call the illness.
yeah.
I believe that these kids are misunderstood. That's actually the word, misunderstood. So that's interesting. And do you remember the moment when you actually realized that the system we live in isn't necessarily aligning with your own truth? And how
Well,
that this realization felt for you?
to kind of start with what you just mentioned with diagnosing children with ADHD or ADD, I was actually diagnosed at a fairly early age. I think close around to middle school, where obviously I was hyperactive. I didn't want to sit still. And the system basically says, you need to sit still, listen to teachers, do your homework, and not speak unless you're spoken to, and more or less don't ask questions, essentially, unless you either raise your hand or it's in alignment with what is being taught. So don't critically think, don't ask why, just accept the narrative as is. and a little bit, I think, on my understanding of ADHD, as I understand it, and as I come to understand it in a later age, is ADD is where the mind is very active and also the consciousness is processing information far faster than I think the standard human or the standard kid at the time. And essentially what medicines like Ritalin or Adderall are meant to do is essentially slow the process down a little bit to calm down the nervous system so you can receive information at a slower pace so you can digest it easier. I remember like when it came to like reading books, I would open pages and it would just literally within like 10 pages of reading, I would be exhausted. Like I would just be mentally drained where I don't know if I was just receiving way too much information from, not just words, but whatever the intention of the author. There's so much that comes into a book, not just the words they write. So I think I got overwhelmed very quickly with information. So I literally I couldn't read books for most of like my life, and I still to this point I maybe read 8 books in my life, and that was with a struggle. So it wasn't like I was definitely not a reader. So and school really wanted you to learn read certain books and really like especially big textbooks, and that was a nightmare for me for sure. But overall, I struggled with wanting basically anything that I didn't feel was necessary, I didn't want to do. And if I didn't want to do something, there's no force on this earth that can make me do it. So that's where, my parents struggled quite a bit with helping me understand or helping manage, a kid that just would not listen. Right. I wasn't necessarily, violent or rude, but I was just not subordinate to how things would move. And if if I was failing something or if I was getting a D, I didn't care. Like it was just like, especially with math, I was like, what was the point of me learning? All like I understood addition, I got that, I learned that, I understood multiplication, that was fine. But when it came to algebra and the complex math, that was just confusing to me, but it was also irrelevant to me. So like if it's something doesn't like when something was not relevant to me, I was critically thinking is like how is this going to affect how is this going to help me moving forward? And especially everyone, back in the 90s to early 2000s, the teachers always said, well, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket, right? And then we, in the 2002 or something, we got the first iPhone or whatever it was. It was just silly because sometimes you probably feel like, well, you probably will have a calculator in your pocket, so you really don't need, unless you're, going into energy engineering field or something like that. There was no reason for me to understand any of that. I guess in that way, I was very rebellious.
But general understanding of education is that it comes through the books and only books.
Yeah,
Where the
yeah,
truth is that the biggest part comes actually from experience and
yeah,
feeling of everything and feeling what's around you and connecting the dots. Most of them you will not learn from the books, but just from the
yeah.
life experience. When you actually realize that the work you want to do and pursue is outside of the traditional path.
Oh, that came, I think, much later in my 20s. Explain a little bit of that path before the my 20s, because I
Yeah.
feel that would create a little bit of a context
Mm-hmm.
before we get into the when I really started understanding what I was supposed to do and the overwhelm that happened with that. After like about my I would say middle school year in high school, that was a whole journey essentially that I experienced of I was very small. I was developmentally like I think I was 5'2", or in European terms 100 and what 60-ish centimeters. So I was very small, like I was probably 40 kilograms up until ninth grade to 11th grade, and I remember that also caused a specific level of self-consciousness because at that time, all you care about is attention from girls and being cool, right? So, uh, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because it was a very developmental aspect of me. that I had to look back now and really appreciate, because at that time I remember I was coming home crying to my mom, no girl likes me, because I'm small and all the boys are kind of hitting to puberty and they're growing and they have bigger muscles and all this stuff. So it's much more appealing at that time in that attraction level, let's just say it that way. So, but when I look back at it, it was the the universe essentially, or my developmental stages protecting my innocence, right? Because at that time, I remember seeing how the boys that were maturing faster, how they were treating women at the time, how they were treating the girls, and it wasn't very respectful, right? They were, being very rude. They were saying very derogative terms, and they were just treating them as objects,
As
essentially.
objects,
Like,
yeah.
exactly. And
Mhm.
it's just like, okay, so that honestly helped me experience the masculine feminine dynamic at a very early age from the sideline, even though obviously, it was through hurt feelings at the time, but at the same time, it was still, I think that was the key moments that helped me maintain my innocence, because now at this stage in my life, I'm 195 centimeters and, like 80 kilograms, give or take, 76, if we're being honest. Um, and if I did develop much later, I do not believe that I would have been able to maintain as pure of a state as I have now, because of, it's very easy to fall into the same trap of when everyone's kind of doing the same thing, you typically follow the consensus. I might have had a little bit more resistance, but I feel like it would have been much more difficult for me to maintain, I guess, the specific innocence. And I'll explain why maintaining the innocence was so important during that time.
Mhm.
That's why I kind of really wanted to mention that crucial point
Mhm.
of my evolution.
Mhm.
But
I think
then,
it's quite important. Many teenagers are struggling with this, and I can rely on that too in my
yeah,
own life, like times when I was teenager. I also felt like, oh, none of the boys wants to look at me, but now I know that was actually also the protection. I believe, and I'm quite grateful that you mentioned that, because I believe that many of the young people, the young generation, should definitely listen to that and
maybe even
find that.
some of the older generation that has grown up and experienced
Absolutely,
some,
and it creates some maybe form of stress or trauma. So definitely, thanks for sharing that.
my 20s were more or less, that's where I started understanding the world, because I think I was kind of sheltered up until probably 18, 19 years old, where, I definitely didn't have any focus issues, because I can I can sit in front of a video game for 12 hours and enjoy the whole process. So definitely, having an attention problem was not it, even though I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. So
Mhm.
it just brings kind of light to how selective attention can be. And if you don't want to do something, or if something is too overstimulating for you, in a sense, you will not want to do it. But when it comes to, having being in a different reality world where you're experiencing, challenges and overcoming things, and it is fairly stimulating, for as most video games are. But for me, that was the best form of escape that I found, especially when I was in New York City, where it's very easy to go out, being underage, go drinking, go plug, clubbing, go, create trouble, do what, teenagers would do in later ages, or just be more mischievous, potentially, you know, hang around girls and uh, interact in how girls and boys might at the time, and
Mhm.
none of that was interesting to me. Like, clubs for me were, it just felt like a completely different zoo, where the music was always too loud, everything was too much, and I was too self-conscious to even approach women in that way at that time in my life. So I was like, why would I do that to myself?
Mhm.
So, everyone kind of, I think, chooses a form of exile at that time, because reality sometimes is difficult. You might have uh, challenging family situations. You might have a challenging school, you might have, depression that you're dealing with. So everyone always looks for some form of coping mechanism, right?
Mhm.
To deal with reality, because that's kind of the state. And especially, I think in every decade there was some form of a trial and tribulation that we all went through. So
Plus,
that
everybody is,
yeah,
looking for this balance to achieve the balance. So it always finds some way or distractions
exactly.
outside
Yeah.
of
Especially, I think,
themselves.
yeah, especially in the very early ages, like going from the teenager into your early 20s. That's a very crucial time, I think, for a lot of people where they're just starting to figure out who they are and they want to understand, all these things. And for me, I had absolutely no real world experience up until the age of 19, maybe 20. And that's where I got into some like multi-level marketing kind of things like Amway at the time and all that stuff where that helped me just understand how the world works, right? How to create, how to make sales, how to do things, all of these things. But at the same time, I also started going, because my mother would not leave me alone with going to school and getting a degree. And that was the last thing in the world I would want it to do because everyone under the sun was like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. And I was like, I don't want to be anybody. Leave me alone. Like, because I just none of it interested me. So I was like, so basically at a certain point we had to come to agreement where I had to choose some form of direction of, some schooling, right? It's some higher education. So I chose culinary arts as my form because I was like, okay, well, I like to eat. And eventually I'll need to learn how to cook to eat because my mom can't always, provide food. So I was like, I think this is the logical choice.
That was
Like,
clever choice.
yeah, exactly. I was like, because it was like, what else am I gonna do? I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that. So I was like, I
I
didn't
think
really want to be yeah, yeah, go
you
ahead.
you knew it. You want to be just yourself, and
Exactly. Yeah,
you live with your truth. You maybe didn't realize yet that particular moment what it really means.
exactly.
Because I'm
And
trying to get to that point.
yeah,
We will get to that point when this
absolutely.
real realization came.
Yeah. And yeah, I think at a certain point, like I didn't even want to be a chef, to be honest with you. But because and the funny realization that came with all of that was that I went to I was a pastry chef assistant. I worked at some Russian restaurants. I did some, I tried the scene of working in a restaurant, which is grueling and it's not for the light, of body and heart because you have to
Mm.
be focused on something and always be fast and always do all of the things, to keep up with the pace of service. And at that point in my life, I was already close to 190 centimeters, and most of the kitchens were basically built for people in the 160 variety of 5'4", where especially New York, it was mostly Spanish people that were working in the kitchens. So more or less, they were not of a higher stature, and the architecture was designed, the tables and everything. So I was saying, hey, my back will not hold for years, bending over 8 hours a day, and preparing food, chopping onions, chopping celery, whatever, the preparation needed at the time. This is not for me. Like I cannot proceed my way as a chef in the world because to really be a chef, you have to be crazy enough to be passionate about it, and because it's not an easy job, it's not an easy profession, and you have to fully devote yourself to that craft. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable. That was very easy for me to see, probably in the early 20s, and so at that point, I think I took the path of least resistance because at that time my dad was a superintendent of a building. So I decided to be I worked in security as a doorman essentially for more or less higher end buildings, anywhere from Broadway to Lexington and Park Avenue, which people that know New York City know that those are fancy avenues to some degree, where the Park Avenues and Lexingtons were more or less where the millionaires were, where the Broadways are more or less, you can say you need at least six figures to be comfortably in that area. So. it was upper middle class, definitely upper to very wealthy middle class, higher class. So it was interesting because that was, I'm mentioning the security aspect because that's how I eventually
That's what I
I will
wanted to
explain. Yeah,
mention, you know,
yeah,
that your height already told you what you are not
yeah,
supposed to do
yeah,
in this this life, but
exactly.
the second path you took with the
Yeah,
security
yeah,
actually kind of pointed you towards the
yeah.
right direction already. Well, you do different types of security, and we will talk about this, but at the moment, okay, so you were working then, and what happened after that? So in the middle of your
So
20s.
yeah, so my in the middle of my 20s, I started I started doing some like I was like, okay, well, the 9 to 5 is not going to get me anywhere, just financially speaking. Kind of understood that part because, yeah, I basically in that frame, like in that profession, typically people stay in that job of doorman security because it is a fairly stable, secure job. But when I remember when I was thinking about like working there for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, like the veterans that work there and that basically raised their whole family through this job, I was literally like, okay, well, I think walking into traffic sounds way more fun than that. Uh, because it was just like in my head that was like the most insane possible conclusion for my life because I'm looking at a door and helping people, which I do like to help people, but being bored for 8 hours a day was not possible for my life because for me, I always needed to be stimulated or learning something if I'm working and doing something. Otherwise, I literally lose my mind. Like I nothing about that is good. So I want eventually I got an opportunity to do some a business where it was about, a bit with the stock market and stuff like that, where you can go and understand that and then potentially make, significantly more money than I would in any kind of 9 to 5. I started being a little successful with that, but then I was very still innocent in a sense and naive in how I function. So for me, everything was, as innocent as and as naive as you can possibly be in the world. So, and with that, you need to be very solid, very secure, and very grounded. And I was not none of those things. So as eventually that part collapsed. At the time, I also had oh, some relationships that weren't working out. So romantically, things were working out. I had basically a dead end job that wasn't working out. The business didn't work out. So everything was starting to unravel itself. So I was like, okay, well, I need stability. I need direction. I need structure. So in my head, I always had some part of me that wanted to be in the military, right? And at this point, I was probably like 25, 26. And that's for military, that's already basically you're an old man because most people enter the military around the age of like 18, 19. And then by the time, 26, they're already almost 10 years in the military. So you can understand entering at that point. And in my head, I was like, all right, well, this is going to give me structure and order that I need because I have none of that in my life, right?
Mm.
And so I ended up joining the Marines. And I literally trained to get into boot camp for about a year. I got perfect scores on the ASVAB, on the 27 pull-ups, all the fancy scores you could possibly imagine. The like a 19-minute 3 mile, 5K. I did all like 70 something push-ups, all of the things that you basically needed to get more or less high to perfect scores. And I got into boot camp. And even before that, I was getting, everyone around me was like, "Hey, this is not for you. Don't do this. Don't do this." But when you join the Marines, the conscience is, I want to be the best. I want to be the soldier. I want to be a warrior, and nothing's going to stop me because I'm just going to be forward. I'm just going to be the most masculine man I can be, and the enemies beware.
Mm.
So I got into that, and I remember I got to boot camp, and within a month, I everything started crashing there. I went from being the highest performer to barely able to, do the what is required. And I constantly, my body started collapsing because the conditions are not as ideal for, you're sleeping very little, you're not eating as much as you can be, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of, and this also was fairly, it was starting to be, I think, fall when I got there, so it was getting pretty cold. So, and I remember I got four different infections at that time. I was a respiratory tract infection, urinary tract infection, a bladder infection, and uh, pneumonia all at once.
If your
Uh,
body literally was
yeah, yeah,
saying, this is
yeah.
not for
My
you.
exactly. My body basically said, "Hey, you're not going through this. I don't care how much you want this. This is just not happening."
Mhm.
And yeah, so like, and also my lower back was this close from just being in complete seize. So, because so eventually I get discharged after about a month from the military. I had to go, it took like a few weeks, and then I arrived home, obviously very disheartened, and the masculine energy, because for a year I was a very high performer, and I was actually even training kids to pass the test because I was doing such high scores that the people, the gunnery sergeant and the staff sergeants were all basically saying, "Hey, yeah, just train the kids because you're obviously doing well." So in my head, I was, "Yeah, I got this. There's no problem." And then I got there. When you get there, the body says absolutely no, the spirit says no, and nothing about it was, I wasn't supposed to go through it, but I put myself in it almost to kind of get it out of my head because I always had this idea that I needed to be in the military because it was going to give me something that I thought I couldn't get inside of me.
And imagine how many people are
Yeah,
in the similar situation when they put something in their head,
yeah,
and I was there too.
yeah,
And they try to push no matter what, even the body, and collapses. And there are so many situations that tell us to kind of change the path. Still, people push. And as we heard in the previous episode, my story, how I was pushing into the academic medicine, scientific medicine, and then I changed totally to the natural medicine and more intuitive energy healing, because exactly I didn't listen what my body was telling me. But of course, that requires also some level of understanding and the opening, being aware of this and opening for the change.
yeah.
So,
So yeah, it was very difficult. I think 2 years after that, I didn't work out. Like I stopped doing any physical training because I was just like I was demoralized essentially from the whole thing because I was when you hold on to something so tight and it falls through your hands, you kind of it's a quite a hit. It's a hard blow, and it took me a while to even like unravel that. Like nightmares almost every night, of the failure, of not being enough, of, not being able to hold, this dream or this goal. Obviously, it wasn't for me, but, you know, you convince yourself to such a degree that it is, and then it becomes a very painful expectation that has collapsed. So I think that was the last point of frustration. I think at that point I was suicidal even. I was, very like things were real bad. Like, I tried that business again. Once again, it collapsed on me because, I was grasping at anything possible. At that point, I didn't know what I wanted because I had no direction. Like, I didn't want to be in this job, which was secure, but for me, it was basically jail. And I didn't want to have any kind of higher education because what am I going to learn? Because there's a part of me that literally didn't feel like they can teach me anything that would help me go forward. And then basically, there was a point where I think I said, the story goes, I was with my best friend at the time from high school, and we went into crystal shop, right? And I was like, "Ooh, crystals, rocks, okay, blah blah blah. Let's just see pretty rocks and see where it goes." Because she was very much into it, at all the rocks and the energy behind it. And I remember I picked up like a serpentine, little crystal that had like a whole bunch of different crystals. And I remember when I picked that up, something within me opened, something clicked energetically. I wasn't aware of any of it, but definitely it opened. It's almost the best feeling or the best explanation I can explain that most people will understand is in Star Wars when they press the button to go into hyperspace, when the ships start jumping into a higher orbit. That's literally what it felt like almost in my body at a certain point because I think I blacked out for um, I blacked out for maybe a minute and a half when I touched it, and I don't think anyone noticed that I was just kind of glazing and staring at a wall. And I don't know what was happening, but when I came back, I was looking around. I was like, "What happened?" Because it was just a very strange experience for me because nothing I didn't know about crystals, I didn't know about energy, I didn't know about anything. So I started literally from zero. Like I don't think I could have known less than I knew.
Mhm.
And then from there, I started, this fascination with. I remember I started wanting to know what past life regression looked like, what near-death experiences felt like, what like, and you go to YouTube, Dolores Cannon, and different.
Mhm.
There's a whole bunch of information you can, the absorb because I wasn't a book reader, so I liked videos. I learned well from visual learning, where someone was saying something and I was listening. There was podcasts that eventually I started learning, listening. I think I was deeply into politics at that point because I was trying. Like one of the businesses was to create like a platform to do to because I was aware that Facebook and at the time was very restrictive on like what information you can share, the truth you can share. So I remember we were trying to create a platform around like a free, like a restriction-free platform where people can share whatever opinion they wanted within uh, non-violent guidelines and kind of give people space to speak about politics in a non-censorship type of way. That never really went through because of complications, but uh, yeah, everything was really collapsing, and I was just hungry for information at that time. And I think that is probably the first layer of spiritual awakening. You just get hungry for information. You want more. You want more and more and more and more because that's like you said, we're trained to absorb information when we're interested about something, right?
Mhm.
If we're studying about something, if we're doing something, it's always how much information can I receive about that so I can either make an opinion about it or, get some enlightenment with it, right?
Mhm. So when you actually pick that crystal and later realize that which direction you want to go in,
Yeah.
what's it's more of your interest, like how this moment changed the way you saw yourself, and did you saw actually your purpose already that moment?
Actually, that's a great question because in the very beginning, I think within a few weeks of that moment, I s- I started getting visions of the end result. I was some big shot wearing a suit, understanding like, moving around or, kind of uh, at that point, I was like I was moving around social circles that were high up there, and I was just doing a lot of things. It was not hyper specific, but it was just kind of like silhouettes of like this is kind of what you're here to do to some degree, where I was meant to have some form of uh, notoriety or some form of attention that it is on me, and I was doing certain things. I had no idea what my gifts would be at the time. I had no idea, but I just kind of saw a man with a suit that was kind of very solid in himself and holding a lot of affluence and holding a lot of um, presence and attention, and people very much respected him. And at that time, I was the exact opposite of all of that. I was self-doubtful. I was unsure of myself. I didn't understand anything. I was I thought I was basically meant to be like a worker my whole life, right? Because that's all I knew, and that's all more or less my family knew how to move is you go to work, you get a paycheck, you raise a family, and you survive, right?
Yeah, the classic 9 to 5.
Exactly. Like that was the only framework of reality that I really understood. I didn't understand, really I started, in understanding businesses and entrepreneurship a little bit, but for the most part, that was my only clear understanding of, hey, work is the best way to survive, right? So all of that, none of this made sense to me. And then all these grand visions, I was like, basically, I was telling whatever I was feeling, you guys are on drugs. I don't know what's happening, but none of this is real. How can I possibly be that kind of person, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so we kind that was kind of the my journey in New York, right? And that was I think I spent about 6 months to a year really unraveled because it was just life was so difficult at that time where just so many things were happening where I was constantly being protected from them. I remember at one point I think I was sued for something. At one point I lost the job, the business collapsed. I didn't get into the military, so nothing in my life was working. Romance was, was as bad as it could be, essentially. And nothing in my life was like, okay, life sucks. There has to be more to it, right? And then I think that's when I said there has to be more life. I think that's where I really understood wow, like I was really shown that there is more life. I started to see this unexplainable path or a destination or timeline that in front of me, and it never went away. It just I started to get used to it more and more as time went by.
Mhm. So when you start to feel the energy and truth, was that already in New York, or what happened uh,
So
after you moved from your New York
yeah, so there
actually?
was one defining moment I remember when it came to my gifts. The first time I understood beyond the hunger for information, the first time I understood I have a gift was when I was working at one of the Park Avenue locations, and it was a very affluent building. And I remember there was a tutor that was coming down from a lesson, right? They have tutors, they come, and then this tutor came with horrible sciatica. Like he basically he exited the elevator, about to leave the lobby, and he could not move for anything. Like he was like he had to sit down, otherwise I'm sure he was like in 9 out of 10 pain. And however it was, whatever it was, but at that moment, I remember I was sitting there and I think I was like, hey, something came over me and I asked him, do you mind if I just I sit with you and we just were silent for a little bit and see if I can help in any way? Like I didn't know why I would say that, but it came out that way. So within 30 seconds to about a minute of us just sitting kind of in that place, he opens his eyes and I'm like, and I just look at him, I'm like, did it help? Because I remember at that point uh, I just saw the lower bone and I saw the tension and the energetic kind of ball that was in his, basically where the nerve was shooting down his leg. And I just focused on it. I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. I just focused on it. And literally within about 30 to 45 seconds, 90% of his pain went away. Like just disappeared. And he was looking at me like when I asked him, is did it help? Like shocked. We're like, what did you just do to me? Like I was like, I don't know what I do to you. How am I supposed to know? You know? So yeah, I was that and I remember I think it took me like 30 minutes to an hour while I was on duty of
Mhm.
panicking of like what just happened, what just happened. Because obviously he had the next appointment. So he just left and he's like, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I don't know what you did, but thank you. Um, and yeah, so I started panicking because it's like, what just happened? How did I help somebody in pain? I didn't touch him. I didn't do anything. I just saw something in his back and it kind of disappeared. And then he felt better. So like, and then at that point, I was like, okay, well, there's something there, right? That obviously in a scientific sense. If you see a result, you're like, okay, well, let's see if I can replicate it. Let's see if this is a thing or if this is a one-time situation, because maybe it was a fluke, right, or whatever.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so from there I just started working with anybody that would just just anybody that would be willing to uh, allow me to work on them. And I
Yeah, to
remember,
open even to the
yeah,
idea
exactly.
of.
And whoever anyone open to the idea. I remember I had my best friend. I had a lady at that time that came into my life. She had a very deep level of poisoning from pesticides and different stuff like that. And she was experiencing like horrible skin burning sensations and something like that. And I was like, okay, well, and so eventually without any form of prescription or telling her to do something or drink water or take herbs or anything like that, we do work with her and her symptoms went lower and lower and lower. And, at that point, I wasn't charging anything. I was just excited that people were receiving me and who were getting results.
Mhm. Can you describe more how this work looks like? What you actually do with people?
Well, at that time, because the work evolves over, like we just got into the story of this crazy multidimensional experience, um, and essentially how it all turned out was at that time I was just, okay. I can work with pain, right? I can help people relieve pain. That was my thought, right? Because I had no that was all I can understand. And I saw energy, I can remove energy, and their pain goes away, or symptoms go away, or they just feel better, right? So, and this was just me seeing what I remember seeing. And like, because for me, it's just I see energy and then I focus on energy and the energy disappears in that moment. That's all I remember how things are working. Um, and then there's a point just when COVID started, I think around 2020, right? Uh, I was I was I think there was a romantic interest that I met through this. I think at one point she was recommended as a client, and then obviously we got romantic, and she invited me to California, right? And from there, that was the first time basically that I left my parents, right? Because I was, New York, when you don't have a purpose, living with your parents is the best purpose there is.
For sure.
Yeah. So, and I was like, okay, this is my first time in the real world, right? Because I experienced a little bit you know, in the sales world, I experienced a little bit in the 9 to 5 world, experienced a little bit in the business world, um, a little bit with stock markets, but I had no real like, how does it feel to live on your own or with somebody, right?
Mhm.
Especially that was also the first time I lived with a woman. So that was a whole initiation all on its own. Uh, And that that my journey in California was all about past life regression. And everyone always asks me, did you go on were you on mushrooms? Were you on drugs? Like, did you take anything to see all these crazy things? And for me, literally, it just came online. Like at one point, I was helping a client, and at that point, that's when I started like being business minded. Where okay, I have enough, proof that things work. Now, obviously, I'm moving out to myself. I need to make money, right? Because I'm leaving my 9 to 5 job. I'm going to a new state. I don't know what's happening, and for me, I always kind of just jump off the cliff and see what catches me, right? Without essentially saying, "Oh, I should have a job before I land," and all this stuff. My brain didn't work like that. So I landed there. I created my website. I started advertising on Facebook and all that stuff. Where I was like just getting clients essentially through whatever means I understood at that time because I didn't understand marketing, understand anything. So I was as new as you can be. But all I knew was when I got to California, it was at that time I was living in Manhattan Beach, which was a quite nice area, and we were right by the beach, very nice. And technically, never left Manhattan. I just put beach in front of it. That's the joke I always say.
Not bad.
And yeah, so yeah, and so for about a year, I was essentially a hermit with this woman where we just more or less I didn't have much of a social life for about 6 months because I noticed when I moved there and within the first month, I had a hard time relating with people. Like I had a hard time connecting, just having normal social conversations or normal social interactions where I was like, something I think happened with me, especially after we met, that I was like, I just felt awkward. I felt weird. Like before, I was like charismatic. I was out there. I was open. I can approach people. I can say hi. And all of a sudden, I noticed I'm distant. I don't understand how to like speak to somebody. It's like I don't know. I just forgot how to relate to people. And all I remember was I was helping clients and I was helping them go through past lives. And at the same time, I was also seeing my own past lives as I was working through myself, because I always start with myself and I work to see how the tool or the creation or the modality that I've created on my own. Because at that point, I remember there was like multiple ways you can do past life regression. Most of them involved hypnosis, right? You regress people through specific words, and then they go into a subconscious state, and then they'll speak, whatever is happening. For me, I was like, okay, well, I want to make it my own, right? I didn't do any course, I didn't do anything. I think at one point I did a Reiki initiation type situation, which was the only certification, let's just say, that I have ever received. But I essentially created my own past life regression technique where I invited people to connect to a specific number frequency. And then as they connected to it, that invited them into like a theta brainwave state, which lowered increased their, I guess, suggestibility or openness, should I say, into being able to tune into their own past lives. So they started to consciously, without being uh, unconscious, see their own past lives. And I kind of guided them through that journey of whatever needed to be taken from that life. Either it was acknowledging some trauma, bringing back a gift, opening up, you know, closing some karmic patterns, whatever it was. I, I went through personally 1,000, I think, different lives of my own, and a lot of times I shared past lives with the clients that I was helping with. And I remember most of those lives were dark. Like there were, deaths, there were, doing things that were, not heart centric. There were, a lot of corruption. There was a lot of, there was many times with Atlantis and its fall. And there was many times where you're going back to Lemuria, and that was the fall of Lemuria as well, and how the dimensions collapsed. There was times with other planets. There was times where I was planets, and there was times where so many different things happened, not just on Earth, but in different star systems, different races. And so you can imagine, it was kind of almost nice that I was a hermit at that stage because I was so more or less not on Earth. The only thing that was on Earth was, the fact that I was having clients, the fact that I was in a romantic relationship, and the fact that at a certain point I started having friends and I started going out and playing volleyball. Like that was the one when I started grounding again, where I was coming back to reality. But a lot of that's what I think I spent my first year. But the main thing I think I learned from all of that was not to judge. And I think that's where, because uh, when you see yourself in other lives doing things that I would never do in this life, you basically are right. Well, if that was my job, if that was what I was meant to do at that time, and I was misguided, misaligned, whatever was happening. Well, now that I'm choosing a lighter path, who am I to judge anybody in the world that is doing something, very, as bad as you can say as Hitler or as,
Mm.
as still bad as most politicians are doing. Just say that, let's just say it that way. So, um, so yeah, I think that was more or less, I think that was the biggest lesson I learned from that. And then if you want to go into more multidimensional ways, I was actually helping another being at that time heal, and it was actually I was sharing a soul with another being.
Well,
Um,
that's an
yeah, and
experience.
and and I was, and this being was of a darker nature. Let's just say it that way. I'm going to keep it vague. Uh,
Mhm.
and um, and essentially all these lives that what I was experiencing was actually their lives that they were going through, and I agreed to help him go through the journey so I can learn not to judge, and they can learn to return back to this to source, right? To return back to the heart. So I think that was one of the first massive initiations that I went through, and
That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
So how would you describe the way people transform by simply being in your field? So I experienced this myself and I see
Yeah.
others, but I would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so oh well, uh, now it's different, and I'll admit, just for the sake of linearity, I'll share it maybe towards the end of my journey or the current state of my journey. Obviously, there's no end, but at that time, it was just people always felt peace around me. Like, and they always felt relaxed. They always felt at ease. They always felt and the one thing that I always noticed, and it was because I like to track patterns, people that never allowed um, people in their system, like they wouldn't trust energy workers, they didn't want anyone to be in their system. Almost always, those same people allowed me in their system. Like they allowed me to work with them. So it was always like a everywhere I went, people just relaxed, right?
Mm.
Whenever there was like a story or some stress in their life, if I was there, they would open up to me. They would tell their life story, their experience. I would basically, I would know everything about them within the first 30 minutes. As much obviously as they wanted to share, but it was always like an emotional dump every time I heard. Every time I was around a new person, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, finally I can share this with somebody," and then they were like, "Why did I share this with this with you? Like, I just met you, I didn't even know you." But like it was like this feeling of trust automatically that was created without anything. And obviously, as time went on, as I grounded more, as I understood more, it got different, and I got more into time, and we'll share that a little bit later. But the next journey of my life, the next initiation was when because at that time that the relationship with that woman went sideways, and then I moved into my first kind of spiritual job where I was hired as a director of a healing center at the time, where I had absolutely no uh, resume or skill set outside of, being very in tune and being very intuitive and having fairly decent sales skills, but no actual resume of running a healing center. And this old man decided to say, "Hey, I want you to bring in more people, and I'll hire you on a salary." I'm like, "Well, that sounds great." So I think I spent anywhere between 2 to 3 months in that position until COVID ended up taking his life. And it was, I would say it was avoidable, but it was this typical mindset of the masculine that needed to always push, 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 and didn't listen to needing a break because he was he had more than enough resources to stop and just enjoy his life, but he wasn't able to. So outside of all of the advice, he kept on pushing, and it was what it was. And then and literally in that moment, maybe 2 weeks afterwards, I'm like, okay, what's next? Like, what am I supposed to do? help, and I was with a roommate at the time, and she was like, "Let's go to Hawaii." I'm like, "All right, well, you're completely insane. I have literally at that time, I probably had like $500 or $600 in my pocket. I'm like, what are we gonna do with Hawaii with that with that money? Like, I literally I just lost my job. I have this much left, and you want to go to Hawaii out of all place." So, and she's like, I know a person, maybe we could stay with him, right? And literally, this is how that journey went.
So
Uh,
another
yeah,
going out from another comfort zone.
100. Like this was
Okay.
probably the biggest. I think if she did not say that, I would have never done this by myself because it's so ludicrous and it's so irresponsible for most people to ever even consider something like that. That yeah, it was very like it would definitely needed a co partner in that madness to move forward. And so I remember literally we landed in Hawaii and we stayed the first night on the beach in a tent because there's no way like I can spend $300 for a night in a hotel or anything like that. So I'm like, all right, let's see where it goes. And then that same morning we met up with this man that she knew and he ended up needing people to do some work around the house, paint the fence, do all the things, and we can get to live for free, right? So, it was one of those crazy events where like, all right, no, now I'm in Hawaii and I'm stabilized, and I have next to nothing to my name, but I have, there was something about the Hawaiian Islands that they just put you into another initiation. There's I think 7 islands, and each island represents one chakra point. And so depending, like I landed in Kauai in the beginning, which was like the third eye, and it was a beautiful experience. They had two young daughters, and it was kind of I was able to babysit them, help out around the house, do all the things. Eventually, me and my roommate went separate ways, and within I think 3 months, I was invited to Maui, uh, and that was when I think I spent about a year and a half to 2 years, and that's where I really started understanding uh, quantum security, like the quantum security aspect. And well, I'll define that a little bit later. But more or less, I started doing quantum surgery at the time. And quantum surgery for me was I basically this was not past lives anymore. I basically stopped doing past lives, and now I just went into quantum field, into people's fields, and I saw detailed understandings of their chakra system and what was blocking it and how to unwind it and how to move energy forward so they can move into the next layer of their journey or release specific interferences from fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh dimensional entities that were not serving them and then reconnect into the entities that were serving them as we have guides, but there's also, shadier service to self beings that wish to siphon energy or interfere or block certain things from your remembrance.
So can you actually describe the quantum security term? Because I believe not many people know what
Yeah.
it really means.
So how quantum security first came around was my understanding the of the quantum surgery aspect, where I was dismantling technologies. I was helping people restore their sovereignty. I was helping people feel themselves again because most people walk around life more or less powerless, thinking that whatever they see in front of them is all that there is, right? And then they're like, okay, this is the cards that I was dealt, and this is what it is. And as the years went by, and as I went through my initiations in Hawaii, where Hawaii is especially Maui, is such a mystical place where dimensions bleed together. I literally had, if I was going into caverns, I would see gnomes, right? In different dimensions. I would see little people. They were like menahunis that they were called, and they're they're pygmy people, probably anywhere between I don't know, 50 to 60 centimeters. that were, present in the three-dimensional realm in the times of Lemuria, and it was just such a mystical, wild experience in the physical world where I was, there was times where I was in contractual negotiations with certain races, with the inner earth, with different beings at the time, where I was as far multidimensional as you could possibly get on the earth plane. And all of that training where I remember I was working as a cab driver at the time. I was a manager of the front of the house of a restaurant. I got into real estate eventually. I got into all of these things where I was just doing the physical stuff, but I was also one foot in the physical, one foot into the mystical, where I was dismantling interferences while driving a cab, or while I was helping a customer in a restaurant, I was noticing patterns in my field that were causing me to drop a plate or stumble or something like that, which was like just different things. So there was no peaceful meditation for me where I was connecting to the stars. It was literally almost like a battlefield where I was in the physical world, but also getting interfered with and challenged in my own ways, and then managing that in real time, and then closing out those channels and then moving forward. And
But this
oh,
challenges are actually shaping us. Many people think
yeah,
of, because
yeah,
you have tried so many things, and many people are trying also so many things, and they
yeah,
feel like a failure. They don't
yeah,
see it as a part of their path and the journey that will eventually lead them to what they are meant to do here. For you was again like very like trying so many things in such a short period of time, but
yeah,
eventually you got there, you got to your own truth. And that was
exactly.
very deep transformation, what you are
Yeah,
saying. Like I know your story. I didn't know the whole story in such a details,
yeah,
but with this, many people when they go through the awakening process, they feel sometimes that it's difficult for them to stay in their and trust actually that process. What helps you to stay confident in your path even when the life felt uncertain?
that's a great question because nothing about my life was certain, and everything was it felt almost like a jump into the unknown. Like even every physical action, everything, from the my journey into Hawaii, into every step forward, from the different job opportunities in the physical realm to me still holding my spiritual practice where I was helping people on the side, you know, doing a lot of local work. I was kind of getting a little name on the island of, oh, there's a guy that does some cool things. And yeah, it was incredible. Like I think I had a really, really fun time. Um, exploring that island myself, the multidimensional realms, but also, the struggles with, survival. We're like, well, I need to make the next $200, or how am I gonna pay rent? How am I gonna do this? How am I going to because Hawaii was also not a cheap place to live
Mhm.
in that sense, where you needed to, I think I remember in my head, I was like, I need to make like $200, $300 a day for me to be okay, kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so I remember balancing the survival, the multidimensionality, the and the joy and the fun and all of that all at once. And it was really, really quite a lovely experience. And then at that time, this is all kind of building up because this is the first time I think I'm sharing my story in this detail, where it's like I gave people, more or less, I've been on some podcasts where I shared some things, but this is the first time I really want people to like understand the life that I've been through. Not from a sense of mental like understanding, but just to feel that whoever they see in front of them now, or whatever my clients see now, it did not come, I was not always this refined type of man. Like there was quite a bit of a refinement, and I started literally from nothing. Like I started from not understanding anything, not having any uh I had very little teachers in my life. There's some people that came into my life that guided me in very short pockets, but there was never like a guru that I looked up to or anything. It always felt like I was creating my own modalities. I was
So pretty much you always
writing my
have
own
to
path.
rely
Yeah,
on
exactly.
what you feel and you
Yeah,
what you think
yeah,
at that particular
yeah.
moment.
And I think the most grounding thing for me in the sense of how did I stay trusting the path, even though I didn't know the next step forward. I did muscle testing where I connected to my body, and for me it was something that's like this is yes, this is no, right?
Mhm.
And even when things didn't make sense, I would just connect to my body, connect to my higher consciousness, and be like, should I make this decision? If I do this, and then I did also did a time traveling technique, which I can basically explain in 30 seconds. It's super simple, where I just any situation that I feel like any decision I have to make, let's say I'm invited to a party or I want to stay home, right? Or there's another party that over. So which decision do I go to, right? And I feel into each moment like as it is as I'm going into the future, right? If I was in that moment, how would I feel in that moment without, just energetically in my heart? And I would either feel expanded or contracted. If I was feeling contracted, I would know that it would not be a fun experience. If I was feeling expanded, there would be either a connection, either a fun experience. It'll be something expansive where I would either I could also be challenged in a very positive way, right? But if it was a contraction, there's times where I also played the game and I went to expand the contraction route. I'm like, oh well, that sucked, and I knew it was gonna suck, but I wanted to experience it, you know?
Mhm.
Um, so those to really ground myself, those are the two main things that I used to keep moving forward because the mind will tell you all the crazy things because you were conditioned to listen and to be have some form of control, especially as a man. And this kind of also brings me into the journey kind of the masculine that I had to take, where I would not be, I was at every moment in every task of my life, I was not allowed to fit the norm of the masculine that pushes, that grinds, that sacrifices, that provides without the consideration of himself, right? That's always, just pushing forward without like, if he's tired, he takes caffeine. If he's feeling emotion, he'll numb it with alcohol or some other and you can't feel, you just have to keep going, and that's all that matters. So every time I tried to put myself in that situation, I was bounced back, right? Because the way I was built, I was built like my default setting is kindness and nurturing. Like, doesn't matter how, whatever capacity I was, that was the default setting that I had. So some people would call that more of a feminine qualities. But I think in that aspect, I spent quite a bit of understanding the feminine in that capacity, the feminine energy and how it worked, especially as I was integrating it into, you know, how to make money, how to where to find a job, how to run a business, how to charge for my business, how all these things were always but I was always trying to do things with least amount of effort as possible. So most people will consider that being lazy. For me, I was always thinking about that as being efficient. I did not want to spend more energy than I needed to. And anytime I spent more energy than I needed to, I was just like, okay, this is not for me because it would fail. I tried all forms of things from internet, drop shipping to whatever ways you can possibly think to make money online. And none of it was this stuck. Like I went and dedicated certain things, but it just felt contracted in my heart, and it felt like I had to push through it to learn. And anytime I do that, it closes all forms of success for me.
Mhm. I think
And
it's
obvious,
mhm.
yeah. And then and through this time, I feel comfortable saying that I deeply struggled financially because it was a very challenging time to how can I fit into society? How can I make, a living being who I am and not completely sacrificing who I am, but also not starving and not, being homeless or something like that. Thankfully, I never experienced that those extremes where, but at the same time, it was always I always cut it to the wire. I always like, all right, I got $10 in my pocket, and then somehow the next day something will come up. But it was always a real slog through all this training. This training took about 2 to 3 years, where I was just constantly every single day, either I was processing something, I was realizing something, I was training in the multidimensional realms. This is not through meditation. This was literally through daily life. I was walking, and it was like my life was a meditation. Very rarely would I be in a still state where I was just feeling and connecting to the realms. It was always like an active meditation where I
Mhm.
was connecting to everything that was going around me and scanning and understanding and making sure there was no interferences, that I wasn't this, I wasn't that. I felt like a secret agent in sometimes.
Yeah. But thank
Uh,
you for
yeah,
mentioning and being
yeah,
open with this masculine energy, because I believe that many men are suffering because of that. It's the combination of the safety also and
yeah,
what the society demands from the men at the moment,
and the
uh,
shame that will come from
and the
expressing that
shame.
they're
Yeah,
struggling. Yeah,
yeah. So I think just by opening that topic, you send quite the good vibes towards the
yeah.
masculine part of this world.
Moving forward with this whole story, how the masculine, this started developing in me, because I ended up getting into another relationship with
Mhm.
a lovely soul, and through there, I connected through a very high dimensional civilization that she worked with, and they literally, I think, for 2 years, ended up being my teachers, like, because I remember I always had a hard time finding teachers in the physical world, like people that really could help me move forward. Like, I never found a guru or anybody in the physical world that could help me move forward. And then, this beautiful soul came into my life, and she was the embodiment of this civilization. And this civilization. They were called the Arcturians, and beautiful, beautiful, direct beings that connect to you, to your heart, and give you exactly what you need. And it's not said with the love that you expect from the higher realms. It was direct, it was love, it was loving in a very masculine way, right? It was loving in a very direct, informational, everything was this is what you need. We're not gonna play around the bush type situation. They're not gonna use fluffy words. It was just, all right, this is what's happening, this is how you're doing things, and this is what you need to do to move forward. And I was blessed in that capacity. I think that's when I started really understanding the quantum security aspect. Because at that point, I was in the quantum, I was understanding things, but I wasn't understanding the boundaries that needed to take place of my nature is kindness. So I was even trying to be nice to the darker beings, and trying to be like, yeah, I know you're kind of harming me here, but like I understand where you're coming from, and like let's not hurt me, but also let's try to be friends if we can. You know, that's the innocence that I kind of, and I think that's
Mhm.
that source innocence that I maintained since my high school days, where it was like I was trying to be friends with everybody, and
Mhm.
typically that's what causes the most harm, because at a certain point you can't be friends with anybody, and that's what I had to
Yeah.
learn. That's what I learned the most. Um, with these teachers, where they said, hey, you have to cut some agreements, some cords, some interferences, and you're allowing them because you're just being nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not because you can't do it, just because you're afraid of hurting feelings and all this stuff, and the things that basically even people that are harming you are, you're still like,
Mhm.
you understand why and all this stuff, and it's kind of like almost you can never be upset at somebody.
Mhm.
um so from there, I I went through a journey that led me to the term quantum security, where essentially it was the way I explained it for most people to understand is when the internet first came out in what, 98 or 92, whatever span, and we got access to internet and everyone started connecting themselves, right? That was the first stage of human collective consciousness, the internet, right? Where everyone's interconnected, everyone can connect. Now, the next stage, around after about 2012, the stage came online where the internet starts going inwards and not outwards. So we became the Google, the heart becomes the Google, the heart becomes the quantum processor, and the human, the physical vessel becomes the hard drive that holds the information and processes now, similar to how a hard drive or a motherboard would process information and give you feedback and a screen and
Mhm.
prompts and programs and files and storage pathways and all this stuff in connection to the internet. At that time, when people started understanding, hey, my information can be hacked. Hey, my information can be corrupted. Data can be deleted. So there needed to be a protection mechanism now because everyone's connected, but there is nefarious activities because that's kind of the contrast that we experience here in this reality.
Mhm. So why do you
So
feel the quantum security is needed in
yeah.
the world exactly now?
When the internet came out, programmers started happening, and then hackers happened, and then counter hackers. So hackers that would protect people from other hackers, right?
Yeah.
So the data would not be stolen, so their processing systems would be more secure, especially on the military front of things. So obviously, destructive technologies would be safe from manipulation and from destruction. So that's similar to where now instead of us relying on computer, we are the computer, right? We are the mainframe that connects to the quantum. And quantum security essentially is the pathway to help leaders move into their soul mission in the most sovereign way possible. So removing all interferences, reconnecting them back to a level where they're immune, essentially, from. It's not about fighting. It's not about defending. It's about being true to yourself and letting
Mhm.
go of everything that is not you.
Yeah.
That's more or less the core principles of quantum security, and it's essentially the the firewall of uh, our human understanding of how humans start interacting with the quantum field, with the multidimensionality that we are, and typically quantum security is needed only when you get into your soul mission, because the soul mission is when the most resistance comes your way. Typically, when you have this idea, you have this vision, you have this dream that you're going to go towards, and this business that you want to build or you're building, and things just unfortunate situations have, doors close, illnesses come, physical injuries or accidents or something happens in your life where you're almost trying to be derailed because that is when you're shining the most light is when you're in your soul mission. And it's a lot of times even defining what your soul mission is part of the journey as well. Understanding what your actual purpose is, what your direction is, because most people are just surviving and doing but either what their parents knew or what they thought was best, but it's not serving them now, even though it got them to where they are now and it served great. And then a lot of times there's a burnout that happens with that, and you have to step back, reevaluate, reconnect, protect until you don't need to protect anymore. And that's, I think, the best way I can describe quantum security.
Well, you actually have very fascinating, not the easiest path of awakening.
Yeah,
And now you are at the moment building also multiple projects. And would you like to share more about them
yeah,
and the vision behind them?
absolutely. As I defined the quantum security and as I solidified myself in the masculine template that now is not does not push, does not fight for things. It operates on frequency first. What that means is frequency first is I create the energetic architecture of the idea or of the business or of my life that I want to see in the world. And then from that energetic architecture, the resources, the alignments, and the form essentially that is required to run the logisticals of the business, of the idea, and it starts manifesting in form very rapidly. Because in the new masculine template that I so painfully had to go through, rejecting essentially the old way the man operated, I now operate from trust, from surrender, and from inspired action, not blind action or not pushing action. So there is no chasing money. There is more of an attraction force than a pushing and a doing force.
Mm.
So the doing is very specific, and it's not a numbers game that I'm playing where you call enough clients, you'll get a specific number. You do enough actions, you get a result eventually. You fail, you fail until you succeed. So it's a whole different dynamic, and from that dynamic, there was a few business ideas that came. Number one and was Avo Peace. Avo Peace was essentially, I had a client in Kenya, and he explained to me many issues that the Kenyans were facing at the time. And the main issue was um, there's corruption, obviously, as there is everywhere, but the main issue was the consumption of vegetable oils. And because from the quote I was given, they were consuming, the family was consuming anywhere between 2 to 5 liters of vegetable oil a month.
That's a
So
lot.
yeah, and obviously from that, his parents and many families he knew were suffering from heart disease, high blood pressure, inflammation,
Information. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, all the things that, you would probably imagine from consuming quite large amounts of fried foods, and vegetable oily drenched situations, which it's a very cultural thing. So in my head, I was like, okay, how do you get a culture or a population off of a cultural staple, right? Because this
Mhm.
is ingrained. So this is not like education alone will not do it, right? You can't say, oh, do better, drink better oils, or stop eating this, right? That's just for a collective, that just doesn't work, especially when you approach somebody with food, especially humans. Humans are very emotionally attached to cultural identity. So it's almost impossible to change the narrative of even if it's bad for you, doesn't mean I'm going to stop, right?
Yeah.
Unless you get to a point where you're just so sick that you have no choice but to stop. But unfortunately, that's not
Quite often, quite
yeah,
late,
yeah, exactly.
unfortunately.
That's not ideal, let's just say it, for the population. And it is, like you said, it is too late at that point because it becomes quite potential malignant cancers and all that stuff that can take you away pretty quickly, and or other diseases. But essentially, what came was the avocado came into my understanding because Kenya is the third largest producer of avocados.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, I know avocado oil is very healthy for the most part, as far as a cooking oil, as far as a substitute for vegetable oil. And it is, has a high cooking, a high temperature smoke point. So all of those things came in, and then but I also connected to the spirit of the avocado, and it like almost it was excited to receive a mission because it was never given a directive of helping people because it was just used typically right now in Kenya. Most of the oil is being exported to Europe, to America, because the economy cannot really support oil, the avocado oil internally because the the income is very low. So this is where I we ended up creating. I ended up buying, I think, 20 liters of oil, and I sent this guy, my client, a sticker of a very specific quantum technology, where one was of uh, the guides that I work with called HR Command, which was a protection seal. And then the next one was a DNA activation sequence for the ancient African DNA that's been shut down a long time ago. And this DNA was shut down centuries ago by the English and the French when they colonized Africa. And it was done by higher dimension, the different, I shouldn't say higher, but slightly higher dimensional beings that knew how to create control patterns. So for humanity essentially to fully wake up, and this is a hot topic here that's being shared publicly for the first time, Africa has to awaken. And this is one of the greatest passions that I've come to uh, develop was this specific technology that awakens uh, consciousness, awakens the codes and the genius of the African people through this carrier, because the oil is healthy, but it's also a carrier. And through trials that I've done in the local area,
Mhm.
within a few days to a week, I've had the results of older people going from lethargic and not wanting to walk to having energy and moving to having higher conscious conversations to being more open to different ideas where before they were stagnant in how they were doing, but for some reason all of a sudden the client was saying, my father is agreeing to things he's never agreed before. My grandmother is walking more often she's taking walks now where before she was laying in bed all day. So it's like, so it's not, avocado oil is not going to do that. This doesn't have
Yeah, it's
that
a
level of healing power.
frequency put
Yeah,
into it.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But it's the activation that I think within the African DNA that I feel was so potent. Obviously, eventually I would love to, potentially create studies where that can be measured in some way. But right now, anecdotal evidence is more than enough for me because if I see results and I feel wherever I'm doing is right, I'll go. I don't need any kind of studies or anything to prove anything for myself. Just because that's just how I work. I'm a scientist in my own way, and I confirm and I verify and I move forward, and you know, no restrictions in the needing to prove things in a physical way really will limit me. So from there, that's project number one, and that's gonna uh, we're gonna launch that probably in the next avocado oil season, which would be probably March, April, May-ish of 2026. So I'm excited about that, and yeah, I'm excited to see who resonates with this and jumps on board. But at the same time, the next project also in Kenya is a school, this is all specifically designed. This school is going to be called Peacekeepers Academy. And essentially, the academy will be specifically for younger kids to essentially train them and maintain their innocence, but also maintain their gifts because each soul comes with brilliance and a mission. And the school is aimed to train teachers to lock onto the blueprint of the student, of the soul blueprint of the mission that they're here to do, and amplify that and help them nurture that moving into from the age of 4 to the age of 7. And 7 is the critical age of locking in your spiritual anchor. And if you can keep your spiritual anchor open after 7, then moving forward upwards to 18 and forward, we aim to basically have kids be masters of their craft by 18. And so instead of just figuring it out at 18 and figuring out what they want to do, how they want to do it, through that decade, they can already be giving their wisdom to whatever craft. Like, so for example, if they're meant to be scientists, they can already, scientists would actually be going and asking them for information, and they can be co-creating with scientists because they'll already be bringing down very advanced information, and their specific genius, because everyone has seen stories of, an African younger man or a child creating some fancy technology that, it's some way with very limited resources and making, some huge discovery. And this is for very little support, very little, understanding of it's not understanding, but very little backing from really where this is coming from. So this school is aimed to basically start aligning kids and leaders from a very early age, and also inviting their parents to understand their process, so the parents could also be in support and not against the development of their children. And then through that, I see, basically many geniuses and many soul-aligned beings coming into this planet and serving in incredible ways. So
So
I have a
that's
deep,
interesting
yeah,
because a person who never wanted to go to school wants to create a school
yeah,
that probably you were hoping for when you were at that age,
absolutely.
because that
So
would definitely probably save a lot of troubles from you in
yeah,
your awakening process. So it's actually a beautiful concept when you can allow kids to be who they are and develop the skills they actually want to develop. So,
yeah,
in the norm, let's say, typical school, kids
yeah,
learn everything and then we have a grades. I never liked history. I didn't like to learn languages, honestly, but I love biology, chemistry, physics.
yeah,
And I was judged based of like all the kids based on the comparison to other kids, but we have to make sure that, come on, like we have all different needs, different interests, and different purpose our soul has on that planet.
yeah. So yeah, and definitely, I would love to have had that as a kid. And I think one of the main gifts that I have globally is to look at systems and see where they're broken and go into them and create bring them back into the original blueprint. So when I see, the education system that's not really providing much use for most kids outside of, training them into either factory work or very destined medical field, engineer, lawyer, doctor, all the classical jobs, maybe even plumber, all the worker trade jobs, uh, which are very useful for society, and society wouldn't exist. But also, there's many kids that don't want to learn math or don't want to learn science or history, and they don't necessarily need to learn it. I believe the only thing kids need to learn in school is critical thinking and how to understand themselves and what they're here to do. And everything else can be an extracurricular activity. If you want to learn history, if you're interested, there's a YouTube video about it. There's so much content, there's so much information out there. If you really want it, you'll find it. And you can do it on your own time if that's your thing. Even if you just like it as a hobby and you don't want to pursue it, because there's many things I'll watch that have no relevance to me just because I like entertainment, right? So, and that
I
can be
think
done.
the base
Yeah,
is exactly to
yeah,
know, to tune
yeah,
into yourself, to really know what you want to
yeah,
do here. And then when
yeah,
you really know, then the informations will come
yeah.
much easier.
So yeah, and I believe there's quite a synergy between the oil and the academy that will launch. Um, and then moving forward, there's also I want funny enough, I do want to have this passion to open a restaurant as well. And this passion is going to be a temple restaurant where I'm very inspired to open it specifically in Crete. And this restaurant, it will be all about redefining how we see food, and through food, remembering who we are, through the experience, making the experience sacred again, and not just a five-star experience or a Michelin star experience where it's just a sensory experience of taste and different gastronomical experiences that we may experience. It'll be about feeling emotions, feeling memories, even remembering past lives through a dish, because everything that will be created will be fine-tuned and very specifically plated to a intention that you would be ordering. So I'm very excited to launch this, and that the timeline with that will probably be around this next summer to next winter, depending on the logistics. But all of that is deeply exciting for me because everything is about remembrance. Everything is about moving forward in humanity's consciousness to a much greater purpose to eventually reconnect back to our to the stars and having a co-creative experience with different civilizations. And I think many people have this feeling. And last time I believe we've had that opportunity was Atlantis. And we were given quite a bit of information, and through that, uh, a lot of information was abused and power was taken over, and then a collapse ended up following. So now I believe there's far more structure and far more heart in how we're doing it, and less mental control that needs to be exerted to uh, maintain some form of control, because typically most fear is fear of losing control, and fear of not being in control, and fear of letting things be in flow.
Mm.
Uh, so that's that. Those are that's another. And then the next, just in case you didn't think my hands were full, I also will be focusing on divine union, retreats, and different structures around how to have a man and a woman essentially relate in a harmonious way. And then we'll speak many things about polarity work in the next coming episodes, and safety, and how it relates to your health as well. And all the steps that you can take to start restructuring, because polarity is so important, because for us as a civilization to be accepted into the Galactic Federation um, is through how we relate with each other, how a man and a woman relates to each other. If that's not done, doesn't matter what business you build, doesn't matter what technologies you invent, doesn't matter what progress we have in society. If a man and a woman cannot be harmonious, nothing really matters. So that, from retreats through different courses to different talks that I will give, and how that operates, and through this podcast and many other platforms in the future, that's one of the big closest things to my heart as well.
So can you tell us how does your day-to-day life look as you try to embody all of these missions?
Oh boy, okay. So my day-to-day life essentially has been a lot of surrender. A
Mm.
lot as I moved to Crete, I've when I was in Albania for a little bit, and it was all about listening to yourself, acting only when inspired, not acting from fear, from survival, from needing to do anything. Because anytime I notice I acted from outside of, anytime I act from fear, anytime I act from a need of something, every like the all my pathways close of
Mm.
success. So what I've noticed and would have been ingrained with is full surrender, rest when you need to rest. Rest is actually extremely productive, and many people I know need to hear this. When you rest, you actually are more productive than 10 hours of work. One, 3 hours of rest and 1 hour of work is
Mm.
actually potentially, through proper alignment, will produce more results than the push and the push and the push until, you can't push any longer. So rest is the most productive thing you can just about do. It's so counterintuitive and it's so counter understanding to most of our logic that we always feel like we need to move, we have to push. And if we're not doing something, we're lazy. And if we're resting, we're not, life is standing still. Life definitely does not stand still when you rest. It moves faster. It moves in your favor. It moves everything in alignment for you when you are still.
Yeah.
That is the most potent time for us as humans to evolve as a collective, as a culture, is knowing that the rat race is not it. It never was, and it worked brokenly, for decades to centuries, but now it's not accepted anymore. And the symptoms of that is burnout, that is depression, that is many people escaping to uh, you know realities of video games, many people escaping into drugs, into alcohol, into emotional unease. All of that are signs that we're not in alignment with ourselves. Uh, the more we start seeing ourselves, the more we sit with ourselves, and the more we face the truth of who we are, the faster life becomes easier. The faster life becomes more effortless. The faster life meets us with love.
To all the listeners, I can
Yeah.
totally tell that this is the truth. The moment I slow down, so many things started to align with me and my path and what I'm meant to do here. But of course, it took a time to understand that and go outside of the thinking box. That exactly when you do more, you have more. This is quite wrong. So to everybody who is listening now us today, it's like slowing down is the way to do it. Can you tell to people who are feeling a bit lost in the awakening journey how to keep on their own path?
The first instinct that you typically get is the right one. The second you question that instinct, that's when you close the path of that instinct. So the first thought is your intuition. The next thought asking if that was your intuition is your mind. So knowing that is important. Number two, find a method to confirm information that you receive. If you're intuitive, if you're awakening, find a way either through pendulum, either through body testing, either through, uh, throwing ideas off of, friends that or confidants that you feel safe refining into, and just seeing if that resonates. Understanding how your energy works. That's also very helpful. If you don't, have you ever heard of like human design? It gives you a very basic framework. You don't have to get into deep into it. You don't have to learn any of it. It helps the specific label will help you understand how your energy works in reality and how actions affect your reality. So you need very basic information in that sense. Don't get lost in it unless you feel passionate about it, and obviously you want to get more into it by all means. But it's just all of these systems, like astrology or anything else, are just meant to give you basic information and guidance to move you forward and to help you understand how you relate with your world. Because everyone's energy is very specific and is very unique in how it interacts and how it interacts in business, how it interacts with love, how it interacts with relations, and how it interacts with, you know, uh, how to fulfill yourself and how to move yourself closer. Knowing that your inner state is your highest proof of success. When you feel peaceful, when you feel calm, even if your external reality does not show it, that is the best sign that you're in alignment. When you're chaotic, when you're always in your mind, when you're trying to push and you're feeling tension and you're feeling all of this frustration, there's a good chance that you'll only be getting feedback in your life that will mirror needing to be more on time, needing to be more pressured, having more deadlines, having more things. So your life will continue to be in that stressful pattern. When you slow down, you will understand how much more you can actually get done. When you take a deep breath, even in those even in those moments, even when you're just so lost, taking just one deep breath and stopping for a second can just transform that moment completely. So, and everyone has time to take one deep breath. So breath will always bring you back to source because we're not breathing in oxygen. We're not breathing in H2O, like the hydrogen, the nitrogen, all the things that create what we believe is what's feeding our lungs. We're actually breathing in consciousness, right? Because when we stop breathing, what is the saying? You lose consciousness. You don't lose air. You don't lose your lungs. Your organs more or less can function for minutes. Your brain can function for minutes afterwards, you know. So your physical body is fine without oxygen for a little bit before it becomes a problem. But we lose connection to our reality, our consciousness, our how we function or how we connect to this world. So the more we connect to our breath, the more we connect to our reality. The more we breathe in, the more we can live, the more we can feel, the more we can experience. And if you're doing anything to harm your lungs, through cigarettes, through being exposed to specific irritants, candles, whatever you're doing, that's ideally if you can avoid that in however capacity, whatever you need to go through to clear your lungs, because they are your source of life force. They are your source of uh, moving forward in this world. And whatever you can do to protect that space, that's where your heart is, that's where your blood is, that's where everything that helps you function in the most aligned state lives. So that's I think the best advice I can give at this moment.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing not just the ideas, but the felt experience of living as conscious emotion and where actually people can connect with you or learn more about your work.
Well, yeah, you can definitely connect with me on Instagram, on Facebook. You can find me at Nikolay Ayerov. That could be you can find it in the comments below. You can also find it under New Earth Leader, the New Earth Leader. But typically my name is enough and there'll be links below for that. And then, nikolayayerov.com, that's my website. You can search it as well. If you wish to know about any of my programs, there's only one that I'm offering right now. I'm not offering any sessions outside of very specific situations that you know, allow myself to prescribe whenever I feel is necessary. But right now, the only thing that I'm offering is a 3-month container, and that's essentially a structure where I bring you out of time and space. We connect in a way that allows you to slow down immediately, connect back to yourself, and start experiencing time in a whole different way. And this kind of also briefly goes back to how people experience me now. Most people, even in my friend circle, uh, will, and you can speak on this as well later on, is they just time starts working differently. Time compresses, a lot more happens, and in the container, it's more of a refined and focused capacity where you will experience roughly 2 to 5 years or more of internal growth of linear time in a span of 3 months. So, and it's going to be gentle, it's going to be effortless, and you're going to be able to whatever your specific mission is, it'll be designed to help you unlock your gifts. It'll be designed to help you unlock your, any tensions you have in your life, any frustrations. It'll help move things faster into your life. If whatever your specific mission requires, it will get you there gracefully, because awakening is very difficult, and through this process, grace and effortlessness is introduced into the journey, which is more or less rare to experience in a spiritual awakening, because it's very challenging to look at ourselves and our truth without a proper container to be held in. Uh, this container is also not meant for everybody. It's meant for very specific individuals. Right now, it's only open to about 3 individuals. So I will not be taking more than 3. Once that is, once that is filled up, and then maybe in the next few months, more spaces will open up. But until then, there's also going to be a quantum security specific training where that's going to be unique to 12 unique individuals, and those unique individuals will know exactly who they are when the time is right to step in. So everything that I do is very, very specific to very specific souls, and you will know if this is right for you specifically because you will feel this pull and this call. It's not this, there's no sale pitch, there's nothing that's going to happen where I'm going to convince you to do anything. You just will know this is for you, and that's it. And if you know, you know.
And thank you once more for sharing this deep story of yours. And for listeners, yes, stay tuned for our next episodes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.